Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income producing real estate investments. Now, guys, our guest for this week's show is real estate developer and investment expert, Joe Evangelisti. Now, Joe is a second generation builder, and starting as a young child, he began visiting construction sites with his father. Now, since then, he's always had the urge to be involved in real estate and be building things. This led him ultimately to his path of joining the US Navy Construction Battalion, the Seabees. And then after serving multiple tours and racking up numerous service medals, he decided to return home and start his professional real estate career. Now, within a 15-year time span, Joe's ultimately has been able to build an 8-figure real estate empire and has completed over $100 million in real estate transactions. Now, fast forward to today, where we're at today in Joe's world. He's been able to transition this passion and wealth of real estate knowledge into building state-of-the-art self-storage facilities across the country through his firm, Legacy Developers, with the goal of developing 100 facilities over the next 10 years, and he's well on his way. So, guys, I'd like to welcome Joe Evangelisti to the show. Joe, my friend, how you doing this morning?
Fantastic, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you here, buddy. Excited to dig a little deeper, pull back the curtains and get a better look at, not just the business today, but also the evolution of the business. And so I guess before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, let's lay the foundation, if you would. Sure. Let's back it up a little bit and tell us a little bit more of your backstory. I mean, I gave you that brief introduction. Surely there's more to the story. So if you would fill in the cracks for us and give us a better understanding of who you are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's humbling even hearing the bio on the way in. It's like, who is that? I don't remember. I don't know who that guy is. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. I'm a product of construction, man. I grew up as a son of a builder, as you mentioned, and just always loved the construction trades and always loved, he started out the first 15 years of my life doing mostly drywall. So, I mean, I was taping, hanging drywall when I was a kid. I was cleaning up drywall scraps when I could barely walk. So I just love being on the site, and, very early on, I think it also gave me the love to like see things create and be built and turn into something, so that's always been with me. I just love creating and seeing a project come full circle. So, right after high school, I was able to be lucky enough to get into the Navy. And, I was telling someone a story the other day. I almost went in the Marine Corps because I thought that was like the cool thing to do. I was either going to be a Marine or a SEAL, and I didn't think I was strong enough to be a SEAL, so I figured I'd do the Marine thing. And one of my dad's foremans at the time in the general contracting company was like kind of my quasi boss right out of high school. And he's like, dude, go into Seabees. And I'm like, what is the Seabees? I've never heard of that before. No idea what that is. He's like, you can do construction in the Navy. You can go and do all the stuff you're doing today. Yeah. So most people have never even heard of the Seabees.
I've never heard of it. Yeah. I would love to know more.
Yeah. It's very interesting. They really created post World War II as demolition specialists. Like they would go in and one of their tactical missions is to go in and take over airstrips, like foreign airstrips, because when you take out air defenses, then you can bring in ground troops. So they would bomb the airstrip, and then the Seabees would come in and they would have to do what they call rapid runway repair. I have a hard time saying that. And we would go out there with concrete trucks, just mix concrete, pour it, flatten out the surface, clean it off. And then we could, of course, bring our air support in and our air defenses for that, whatever forward operating base that we're trying to establish. So that's really kind of one of the origin stories. There's a bunch of other ones, obviously, but yeah, we never go on boats, never go on ships. We fly everywhere.
Interesting.
We build whatever needs to be built. And, I've built quite a diverse group of things over 6 years, and got to serve in Camp David for a couple of years over a couple of different presidents. So I had a really, really cool tour, and just really enjoyed the hell out of my 6 years I served.
Very interesting. Curious, how the hell do you bring concrete trucks in, or do you get existing concrete? You go, take over existing concrete trucks in the area that already exists, or are you flying in concrete trucks on cargo planes?
So it's very interesting. We actually have this. Now you're quizzing me now because it's been like 25 years, but we actually have a piece of equipment that will create concrete real time. You put the aggregate and the sand and water, and it mixes it on site and spits it out the back of the truck.
Oh my gosh.
Literally as fast as you can drive, you can pour concrete and fill in the holes and keep going.
Oh, that's awesome. Good deal. Well, now I appreciate that background there. So let's talk about, getting back home from the service, what ultimately happened? I mean, like, give us the evolution of your real estate career. And I know that you started in residential. You were doing a ton of flips up in the Jersey area, and then at some point over the last, I don't know, you can fill in the blanks. Over the last years, you've really transitioned to commercial, more specifically self storage. But would love to get a better understanding of kind of the I guess the first phase, the first version of Joe getting out of the military and starting his own business.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say I got in at the most lucky time, and, it was 2007. And so
Okay.
I had to learn to just take my bumps and bruises and right hooks. And so, first couple deals, Kevin, we bought with 20% down, like traditionally went to a bank and got construction loans. And, I just didn't know what I didn't know. So I dumped my entire life savings, me and my business partner, and bought our first 2 or 3 properties. And then a lot of people don't remember, but like '08 was the crash, but it was really softening for like 12 months before then. So it was almost like the minute I closed on these projects, they started losing value as I was putting them together.
Oh, I remember quite well, but yes.
Yeah, it was rough. But we were able to course correct. Like, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just knew I wanted to flip, make a bunch of money, and do it again. And so I was faced within 12 months with like some extreme adversity. It was like, man, are we gonna go bankrupt? Are we gonna walk away from these deals? What are we gonna do? Because we were into them for what they were worth at that time. And so we were really lucky in being able to stabilize them, put tenants in place, and go back to our bank and beg them to recap the loan, and which they did. But it's funny, your show's called, Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. So these 3 properties like made 0 cash flow for probably 5 or 7 years. Luckily, we're in an area where they appreciated, and we ended up selling them, I think 10 or 12 years after we did that job, and made some money on them. But it really forced me to learn how to use OPM, how to find private lenders, how to be creative, and got really lucky after that because the short sale boom went nuts, and I had my real estate license, and I helped a lot of people out of foreclosure, and was able to buy those houses as a result. It was the Wild West at the beginning, as you remember, with the short sale craze, and there was no attorneys involved, and the banks had no idea what they were doing, and so from like '09 to 2013, we just absolutely killed it and did a lot of really good deals.
So you guys were mostly just fixing and flipping. Was that the business model?
Yeah. Well, at that point, when I started out, I had no intention of being a landlord, as I think a lot of flippers are, because they're in construction. They can't think that way. Then once I became a landlord, I was like, man, this is not really that hard. But with the asterisks on there of you got to build volume, right? I think if I have had 2 tenants for the last 25 years, I would think it was hard. But we started scaling. So during the short sale craze again, it was like, do we buy it and keep it? Do we buy it and sell it? So we did pretty much like a 50-50 mix for a long time there. We were buying stuff cheap enough where if we just, cleaned it up, we could put tenants in place and not have to go through the risk of trying to flip it.
So I was reading your story, during that period of time, obviously doing lots of flips, doing, just lots of residential transactions, generally speaking. But at some point you hit a period of burnout. Talk to us about that a little bit. I mean, just, what did you scale your business to? And then really, what was the precipice of the actual burnout? I mean, what was the point that you were just tired of? Like, no more, we got to find a better way to skin this cat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really have a ton of respect for those that do fix and flip at a high level. It's
Me too.
Really grind. It's a grind business.
It is lots of moving parts, just lots of shit going on, just lots of variables. It is. Yeah. It really is. It's more than a job. It is a grind. Grind's the best way to put it. Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I mean, after 10 or 12 years of doing it, that's basically what it amounted to. It was like, I started trying to, and I definitely think it had a lot to do with hiring the right coaches and asking the right questions and really getting the right results. And, one of my coaches was like, what are you chasing? What are you trying to create? I was like, chasing, such a great word. I'm like, man, that's all I feel like I'm doing is chasing. I'm trying to get to closing. I'm trying to pay payroll. I'm trying to, and we had 45, 50 employees. We had dozens of subcontractors. And so it would be like, we would do everything we could to get 1 or 2 deals to close in a week, take all that money. And it felt like I used to joke, like I could put $500,000 in my bank on Friday and my business partner would have it down to 0 on Monday. Like it was just, this cycle. And what it really occurred to me at the time was, and that's why we call the company now Legacy Developers. It's like, we weren't building any legacy wealth. I was collecting, a couple single families here and there. And I think over 12 years, I collected about 112, 15 doors, something like that. I was like, man, if we get in a commercial, what does that look like? How many deals can I do to build up the same amount of equity? What do I need to do to build up the same amount of equity? And that's when we started looking at, other alternative ways to create much larger wealth, but also again, much more cash flow. And that's where commercial real estate really changed the game for me. When I started analyzing it, I was like, man, I could do one of these deals and make as much profit as our last year. To answer your question, we did 88 flips. And I was
Wow.
like, man, I went to my partner. I'm like, what do you want to do next year? What's the goal? You want to do 100? You want to do 110? He's like, dude, I don't ever want to do 88 again. I was like, I'm so glad you said that, because I don't think I had, my ego wouldn't allow me to admit that. Right. So, I was fried. I was tired. I was in worst shape of my life. I was stressed out 24/7. And if he didn't say that, I think I'd still be flipping houses. So we made a hard pivot, a hard shift, and decided commercial was the way to go.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There was I'm sure that you're familiar with Collective Genius. Maybe you've been a member or a member of it. Are you familiar with that mastermind?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So I was a member many years back. Before there were now I think it was always single family focus with, a few weird anomalies like me in there that were, more in the commercial side of the industry. Today, I think it's a little bit more mixed bag. I think there's a lot more
Definitely.
guys in there doing multifamily self-storage, what have you.
Yep.
I think this is back in like 2018. And I remember, and I've kept in contact with a number of folks I met. There's some great people, both that run the organization and are a part of that organization. But I just remember, and I come from a residential background, so I've owned hundreds of single family doors. I've been there and I've done that. I never really got a big flipping machine in place, just because it was so much damn work to go do it again. And so we would typically renovate and then hold. It was more of a buy and hold model.
Yep.
But even then, the grind of buying 100 and 120, 130 homes in a rental portfolio one by one by one, it's like banging your head against the wall. And I remember during one of the presentations at Collective Genius, and I forget who it was. Maybe it was yeah, anyway, I forget who exactly. There was a number of them, right? There's more than one individual in there that's doing hundreds of flips a year. And I was like, holy crap, what a
Yeah.
nightmare. I was like, I'm impressed by what you've done. Like, obviously you're making a ton of money,
Yep.
but I can't think of anything, worse in my opinion of that right there. Like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that business model ever again, especially to that scale. And while they had a lot of good systems and processes in place, which you never get to that volume unless you've got some incredible SOPs in place. But even then, I'm like, I feel like there's an easier way, man. I feel like
Mhm.
there's a better way, because you're making a ton of money and you're obviously a really intelligent individual to be able to even scale it to that size. But there's a much better way, an easier path forward, as I think you discovered,
Yep.
with taking that same knowledge that you had. I mean, you're doing a single family home transaction. Really, the pieces of the puzzle are pretty much the same as doing a commercial transaction. Obviously, at a much bigger scale, and there's some other nuances there. But still, generally speaking, there's as much of a headache to for the most part, of getting a smaller transaction done than that of one that's got a lot more zeros on the end of it. And in fact, sometimes the one with more zeros is actually easier, because you've got more sophisticated folks involved in the transaction. Lending a lot of times becomes a lot easier. There's better options as far as financing goes. And anyway, just once I discovered that many years back, that commercial was, I kind of had a similar scenario. I got burnt out, ran through the crash, and I was like, man, I'm not doing this shit again. Like, I banged my head against the wall to build up quite a substantial portfolio leading into '08. And then it all went poof in a matter of like 2 years, right? Like, it just went bye-bye. It's mostly it was in Florida. The values dropped by like 70, 80% over a period of like 2 years. The cash flow was negative. And I was basically feeding the beast until I couldn't feed it anymore. And basically it was gone. Had to surrender it, most everything to the bank. And this is, if you recall, you remember back in those days, a lot of these banks, they didn't have loss mitigation departments set up. Like, they didn't know, they didn't have even the manpower to handle borrowers' calls to work on restructuring, right? And so it was if I could have held it out for a couple of years, maybe we could have got some restructuring done. But like, it was too much in too short of time, and had to pretty much let everything go, because no one would do workouts with us. But anyway, I guess fast forward, commercial became a much better avenue for me to kind of rebuild again, just all the efficiencies and the scalability of it. So would be curious to know kind of your story. Like, when you started, when you obviously you identified the burnout, you identified like, hey man, I don't want to do this again. Like, I don't want to, I just don't, you want to do 88 flips again next year. I want to find a better way. You started researching probably different asset classes, right? You kind of went on an exploratory mission, to figure out like, what is, because really all these different asset classes are just investment vehicles. That's all they are. I mean, you can have a passion for certain types of real estate, but really at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, what's the best investment vehicle that's going to help me get from here to where I want to go. And so how'd you land on self-storage? After looking at the many different options that are out there, how'd you guys land on self-storage?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, to that point, I believe that you can make money in anything. It's just a matter of how
I
much
agree.
stress and bullshit you want to deal with, right? So like, I try never to like, pick on anybody in the real estate game because I feel like if you do it right and you're focused and you're
Hmm.
passionate, you're gonna do fine.
Yep.
But yeah, no, the pivot really, the real pivot first came with the 88, deal conversation. And then I was like, all right, I'm gonna start exploring. And one of the first places I went to at the time, my buddy Tim Bratz had the Commercial
Hmm.
Empire, and this is going back, I don't even know, 5, 6 years ago. And I went to one of his meetings, and there was like 400 or 500 people in the audience, and I was there for a couple days. And I kept hearing over and over again, like, how do you get your LOIs accepted? Like, I'm calling up and there's 150 LOIs on this property. And how do I stand out in front of the rest of them? And I was like, holy shit. Like, I don't want to be, I'm sure you've read the Blue Ocean Strategy. I'm sure a lot of your
Yeah.
listeners have read that. And I was like, this is the red ocean. I'm in the red ocean right now. This is like
Because it
a
was mostly
world piranhas.
multifamily, right? It was
Yeah,
mostly multifamily is what
multifamily. Yeah.
Tim, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I was convinced I'm going to do multifamily. In fact, I'm going to develop multifamily because I'm a builder and that's what I do. And like I'm going to go out and build apartments. And I'm not to say that I wouldn't or I haven't done that, but as a focus, I was like, man, this is the red ocean, man. People are just chomping at the bit in here. Like, they're talking about sending video LOIs to the seller to try to get their attention, like Grant Cardone style. And I'm like, nah, there's got to be a better way. So I started making some calls around and I remember I ended up on a phone call with a guy named Sean Kruk, who's still a really good friend and mentor of mine in the self storage business. And he was like, Joe, I'm gonna tell you right now, he had built thousands of houses and he had done planned unit developments and he had built like restaurants in Manhattan. Like this guy had experience in development. And he said at the time he was on his second or third self storage facility. Um, and he was like, I'm going to tell you right now, you'll never build another house again after you build a self storage. You won't even build your own house. You'll pay someone else to build your house because the build is so much easier than people think it
Mm.
is. The acquisition is so much easier than people think it is. And again, to this day, he's still 100% right with a few tweaks, right? Like 4 or 5 years ago, you could literally throw a dart at the map of the United States and build a self storage there and be successful. That's not the world we live in anymore. You definitely have to be very focused on which MSA and where's the growth and where's the competition and where the rates at and all that kind of good stuff, which we can get into. But I think if you choose the right market and you find the right site, you're going to do really, really well at it.
Yeah.
And there's some variables you got to pay attention to. But to his point, like the build, man, it's concrete, it's steel, it's asphalt. That's it. That's the whole
Yep.
thing. Like we're done. Like, I have, 25 sheets of drywall in the office and that's all that gets painted. Everything else is concrete or sealed concrete or steel. And so, when you build one of these, it's like, man, you stand back and you're like, I can't believe I built that. That thing's massive. But then you're like, really, it wasn't that complicated, man. I spent more time going to Home Depot picking out tile colors and, trim selections and shit for 12 years. Like I literally didn't have to select anything. The architecture team gave me 3 things to choose from and here you go. And next thing you know, we're out of the ground and we're in our first class A self-storage. So Sean was right with a lot of those things, which
Yeah.
I'm
No.
happy to say.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that. I would love to talk about market selection. You made comment of I guess back when you were having in this exploratory conversation, Sean had referenced that you could just throw a dart anywhere on the map and ultimately probably be successful with a self storage facility. I obviously it's a self storage. I almost it's very it's very much the same in comparison to that like mobile home parks as far as like the consolidation factor. And I think the consolidation factor of self storage might be a little bit more advanced than mobile home parks as far as large institutional groups being in the space and publicly traded companies, but they kind of have their they looked similar 20 years ago. 20 years ago, 98% of mobile home parks were owned by mom and pops, and 98%, if not more, of self-storage were owned by mom and pops prior to, I think, was Public Storage. I think they were the first
They were the first
to really
one.
to get in and consolidate the space. Obviously, fast forward to today, both of those industries, which were not historically on the radar of any, PE or institutional groups, now very much are. All these big institutional groups and private equity firms want to deploy not just millions but billions of dollars of capital into these two sectors. Would be curious to know because mobile home parks are unique in that there's not really new supply. Like there's more that get redeveloped every year than new stuff that gets built. So you don't have this new supply that's coming on the market. You don't have a lot of new developments happening. So when we buy something, we don't necessarily have to worry about, like, there's already a built-in barrier to entry because there's a very slim chance that the new park's going to be built down the road. That's not the case with multifamily, and that's ultimately not the case with self-storage for the most part. I'm sure there's certain municipalities where there's a barrier to entry no matter what. You might get one built, but there's never going to be a second one built. But generally speaking, there's obviously some risk of competition, especially like some of these bigger players in some of the markets that you might be in. So I guess back to the original question of like market selection, just what are you guys looking at as far as what's an ideal market, as number of rooftops, population, median incomes, and what are some of the things that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's funny. Before I say that, I'll say 20 years ago, wouldn't it be funny? You would be unintelligent if you weren't buying office buildings, right? And
that's right. Absolutely. Yeah, that was like the cream of the crop.
Yeah, holy cow. So yeah, no, I think there's been a massive transition in both mobile home and self-storage, and it's become way more main street, right? So that's really one of the interesting buying criteria and ways that we focus is 20, even 10 years ago, self-storage was all industrial. You couldn't get a zoning officer to approve anything that wasn't in the industrial area or industrial zoned area. But nowadays, what do people want in self-storage? They want easy access. They want it well lit. They want it super secure. I've seen statistics ranging from 20 to 35% of self-storage users are single women. And single women want to be able to pull in, feel comfortable, put in their code, feel safe the whole time. Automatic lights going on, security cameras everywhere. They want to go get their stuff. They want to bring it back to their car. And they want to leave without feeling that they're going to be attacked, right? So they want safety and they want accessibility. That has changed dramatically just in the last 10 years in self-storage, again, because a lot of them are down the dirt, dusty road and dark and not well lit. And maybe the security's not that good. Maybe the fence is too low. So it's changed dramatically. And that's also a big part of our criteria. Now, to get into like the self-selection, and these numbers have changed a little bit, but when we started, we had a rule called the 60-60-23 rule, right? And that meant 60,000 in income, 60,000 population, and $20 rates in a 3-mile radius, in long story short. Now, that numbers are going to fluctuate a little. We want a lot more income. You might get a little bit less population. The $20 rates are shaky right now because, frankly, self-storage is experiencing its first a little bit of rate downturn in the last 40 recorded years, 40 years. I mean, it's the first time self-storage rates have started to decrease. I think a lot of that has to do with people not moving, people not buying houses.
Yeah.
We're a very transient based tendency. So those rates, $20 is still really strong. In fact, it's really strong if you can get it in certain areas. And then we're looking at competition and we're looking at pipeline, right? So what's already nearby, and that's also a little bit of a fluid area too, because if everything around you is class B and C, and I'm going to go put a brand new, secure, well-lit, all that I just mentioned in that area, well, chances are they're going to come to me first, right? So, but I also want to see that there's demand there, and I want to see that there's per capita, there's not enough storage to support the needs of the area. So it's scientific, man. It's not like it's not a spreadsheet that you can do on a napkin in 5 minutes. I mean, you can get through the first level of DD in 5 minutes, but really, we got to spend some time, selecting where we're going to build.
Yeah, talk to me about just really being able to navigate through a sea of larger competitors. Again, there's a number of publicly traded space groups in the space, but also some even larger private groups that I just think of it from a standpoint of, obviously it's self-storage is very sensitive to pricing, and it's kind of it's somewhat cutthroat in like bigger markets, right? And again, help me better understand how to do you guys? Well, I guess I should back it up a little bit. Do you guys operate underneath your own brand, or are you underneath one of the other major? Because I know a lot of the major companies also do third-party management, and a lot of developers will develop underneath their brand. But how do you guys operate your ship?
So that's a secret that a lot of people don't know, is that a lot of the bigger REITs, except for Public Storage, they've just got into the third-party management game a couple years ago. But your Extra Space, your Cube Smart, these guys own about 50 to 60% of the doors that you see on the street, right? So one of the ways that we try to create that competitive advantage was to stay in our lane, know my unique ability. I'm great at selecting sites. I'm great at developing sites. I don't want to learn how to manage, and I don't want to compete with the managers. So We're very tight with the heads of both Extra Space and CubeSmart, and we actually underwrite with them. So we get
Okay.
7-year projections from them. We get, and a lot of times we compete both their numbers. Hey, like, what's it look like? Cube, what do you look like in this area? What's Extra look like in the area? And kind of take maybe a blended approach as to what they see. But bottom line is if they don't say build it and they don't say it's a great place for us to manage, and one day we want to buy it from you, we're not even building it.
You
So
move on. Okay.
having them to lean on is huge too.
So you have one or the other of those two brands ultimately end up managing the day-to-day operations. That's kind of the flag you guys go on. I don't know if that's a terminology in the self-storage. I know that's a hotel terminology, the flag, but anyway, so that's a brand you operate underneath. And so how does that typically work with the I'm assuming they like their end objective is to be the biggest in the industry. And I think they always require a first right of refusal if you go to sell.
Mhm.
Is that typically the case?
That is the case, and typically they want to buy, and they're mitigating their risk by by
Yeah.
seeing the full ramp up and getting to a point where okay, now it cash flows, let's take it down.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but
But there's no requirement to you to sell. Like there's no requirement that you have to sell in a certain, like you could own that for 20 years if you so chose to,
we can
correct?
own it for as long or as little as we want. We've sold deals that were 30% occupied. We're looking to sell deals that are 90% occupied now. So yeah, there's no requirement, but yeah, they will put a first right in there. It's loose, I mean, they're going to look at your offer and go yes or no real quick. So it's but you asked the question earlier, 100 self-storage facilities in 10 years, what's the goal? The goal is to do a roll up. The goal is for one of them to buy them all out or
Yeah.
50-50 or whatever. And just make that transition, whether it's, stay in self-storage and buy more or, roll them up and sell them all.
What are the benefits of kind of operating underneath their flag than that of obviously there's plenty of other folks that choose to kind of create their own brand and operate underneath their own brand and operating company. I mean, is there, I mean, obviously you probably did a kind of a SWOT analysis on both. I guess are there any benefits of kind of sticking to your own game plan and running underneath your own umbrella than that of going on with one of the larger operators? Like I see all the benefits of like the larger. They've been there, they've done that. They're in pretty much every market across the country. They've got probably much more advanced analysts on their team that have underwritten tens of thousands of deals. Right, so like there's a lot of value on that side, but is there some value that you're kind of leaving on the table by not operating underneath your own flag?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that question. Number one, first time I saw Cube do like their dog and pony show for us and show us how they manage and show us how they find leads and their pay-per-click marketing and the way that I said, there's no way I ever want to compete with these guys. Like, there's just no way.
Right.
They're going to decimate me in every market I'm in. There's no sense. I'd rather put their flag up than compete with them. But I think the second answer is it's a personal choice. Like again, I think I can scale more by not worrying about the day to day, and I can manage the asset manager versus manage the asset directly. And
Mm-hmm.
they do a great job. I get monthly reporting, I get monthly calls with them. They do all the hiring and firing. They do all the move-ins and move-outs. They do all the like I love people who are like, is that Storage Wars thing for real? Do they auction the units? I'm like, I don't know. You'd have to call my managing company. I don't deal.
That's funny.
So I want to be directly focused with finding great JV partners, finding the capital to do the deal, and going vertical. That's
Mhm.
really my unique ability. And if I wanted to get in the management game, sure, I'm sure we could do great at it. But I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze for whatever we lose in the REIT market. I think I can make up in time and money by going and building 5 more.
Yeah. What geographic focus? I know that we talked about this a little earlier. You're kind of agnostic geographically speaking, but I'm sure like you still have to concentrate efforts to a certain area, I would think, to get the best bang for your buck. And so what is it? Is it Southeast? Is it Northeast, Midwest? Where are you guys spending most of your time and resources?
Yeah, there's definitely trade-offs. Texas was super hot for a while and still I think is hot. Unfortunately, they have one of the worst tax structures in the whole country. They're more expensive than anybody, so it makes it difficult to get financing. There's really, really good rates in certain areas. It makes it more difficult to build, like we're doing one outside of Detroit right now in Livonia, Michigan. Absolutely fantastic rates, absolutely fantastic site. But we're getting ready to break ground next month, and we're in Detroit, right? So the next 7 months are going to be really difficult to work
Mm.
with. So I
Due
think
to weather,
due
is
to
that
weather,
okay?
it's super
Yeah.
cold. Everything's frozen. It's really hard to build, tough conditions, all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so I think there's a give and take in different markets and different areas. I mean, with Texas, I could buy and build faster than anywhere else, but I got to be really, really sensitive to market conditions and taxes.
Yeah. So what internally, what does your team look like? And, knowing that the third party management, it's not vertically integrated, but what does the rest of your team look like internally that are, they're identifying new potential sites, underwriting that opportunity. And then, is all the construction in-house that you guys are working with?
Yeah, we have the combination of both. So we've GC'd our own projects a few times, and then a few times we've hired GCs to build the projects. I would say we're 80-20, like towards hiring GCs and managing the right GCs, especially in Texas and in Ohio, because we have great GCs in those two areas. And so it's actually much to our benefit to just manage those guys. I'm trying to go back to the original question you asked, which was, do we build
Just,
them?
what the rest of the team look like internally? I mean, like, I'm assuming you got someone that's, helping identify new potential sites to build on, and just the general understanding of how do you get from where you're at today to meet that goal of 100 facilities here in the next 10 years?
This to me is like my favorite part. I mentioned I used to have 40, 50 employees when we were flipping houses. I have this team under 10, right?
That's great.
A handful of virtual assistants and things like that. But in the office, I think we could do 10, 15, 20 a year with less than 15 employees. Like, we really never have to get huge. Obviously, we're hard focused on the acquisition side and underwriting and having the right people in those seats in the US. And then we have the development team, which is really a project manager, a project assistant, and my business partner, who's our COO, he's the big commercial construction kind of liaison for all that.
Yeah, no, I love it. Lean and mean. It's interesting because we unfortunately in the manufactured housing space, we have to be somewhat vertically integrated. We attempted to do the third party management many years back, and it was a failed experiment. And have just identified and determined that, like, in order to do it right, we've got to have it in house. And so while our executive team and on the investment side of the house, we're roughly 13 or 14 folks, and we could probably double in size with not much more than that. However, the entire of our organization, when you look at the property management side, we've got, another 40 people over there. And every time we buy another facility, we have to hire another 1, 2, maybe 3 people, depending on the size. Right. And so, like, we have to, continue that growth trajectory and continue building out that employment base, which, again, we never can get to a lean and mean size on the property management side. It's kind of, we like to refer to as the necessary evil part of the business, right? Like, it's not sexy. It's not very profitable. I mean, if you break even, you should be really, really happy. It's just, we have to have it. No one's going to have a better alignment of interest than us. And there's no really groups to even choose from out there. There's a couple of third-party management companies that have a national scale, and we've attempted to use the best of the two. Did a case study years back, handed them, about 18 properties, and then took those 18 properties back within a year span of time, and all 18 were turnarounds again.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. Yeah. But, well, good deal, man. Well, it's been a lot of fun having you here, Joe. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. For those that want to learn more about you and your firm, get in contact with you, stay up to date with projects that you guys are working on. What's the best place to find you or track you down?
Yeah, Invest with Legacy is the website. You guys can go there. And of course, my name is pretty unique. So if you type it into any social media search engine, you'll get LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I just go by Joe Evangelisti. So I'm not hard to find.
That's funny. I say the same thing when I'm on a show. I'm like literally, my last name is so unique. Just type Bup in, like, you will find me one way or another. Like, exactly. you won't mistake me with somebody else. So, right. Well, Joe, awesome, buddy. I appreciate you joining us here today. It's been a lot of fun having you, my friend.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bup, wishing you huge success. Take care now.